Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back for your new moon and Taurus transit update reading. The new moon station's exact on May 16th at 4:01 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're just going to jump right into it. So, as I mentioned for the Scorpio full moon, we didn't have any exact conjunctions or aspects happening in that chart, but we have two very, very precise, near exact, down to the minute aspects in this one for the new moon. And it's also the first new moon that all of the outer planets, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, and Saturn, will be making either a trine or a sextile to one another. Not exact, they are fairly looser, especially between Uranus and Saturn, for example. But this is the first new moon and the first, therefore, the first moon cycle that we will be experiencing, that all of the outer planets will be in the early degrees of their new signs, where they will stay and remain for the next 2.5 to 17 years, depending on the planetary orbit. So this is the new beginning we've kind of been revving up for. I know I've kind of been hinting at it in the other videos of like, get ready, shed everything that you don't need, jettison that fucking baggage, because it's about time that we need that lighter load in order to actually truly take off. And despite it being the new moon in Taurus and Taurus being slow moving, again, we've got some heavy hitters in terms of forward movement and forward progress. And again, Uranus is now in Gemini. We'll still have Venus in Gemini during this transit. We still have a lot of Aries energy that we're moving with. And then, of course, the Aquarius energy. So, really, the Sun, the Moon, and Mercury, a fast moving planet as it is, Mercury speaking, and the Moon being a fast moving luminary, three of the fastest moving planets and or luminaries in the sky are all in the slowest moving sign right now. So even with that added bonus, we're still fast paced through this Taurus season. And honestly, I was surprised that I even had to record this already because it feels like I blinked and then all of a sudden we're nearly at the end of Taurus season. So fast pace, it's time to let it go. And just one more note about jettisoning the baggage that you no longer need. I saw this, I remember it was probably during the Virgo eclipse time last year in August/September of 2025. Randomly, I kept looking up at the precise moment that a bird would drop its load, for lack of a better term, keeping it kosher on here, would drop its load. The moment I gazed, like I would be walking and just looking around, I look up at the bird, immediately it poos. Just drops as soon as my eyes hit it. It happened like 4 times in a single week during that time frame around the Virgo eclipse. And then it stopped happening, and it's happened already twice in the last 3 days again. So we're getting in that energy of letting go of really what we don't need, letting go of the waste. So again, we can move forward more quickly. So again, with all of that said, let's dive in. So the sun and the moon will conjoin one another at 25 degrees and 57 minutes of Taurus, so the very tail end of that 25-degree mark. And then it'll conjoin Mercury within a 2 degree and 44-minute orb. It's funny, herbs, Taurus. Anyway, a 2 degree and 44-minute orb where Mercury will be stationed at 28 degrees and 41 minutes in Taurus. And already, as I mentioned, Taurus is one of the slowest moving signs of the zodiac because even when we look at the other earth signs, Virgo and Capricorn, they have more of a fire under their butt, right? Because they are more of the workaholic aspects. They are the more of the do it to get it done aspect. They would rather get up and do it now so they can kick their feet up later and enjoy the finer things later on in life. Where Taurus is more about that luxurious side at all times. They would rather find the easiest way to do the thing so they don't have to actually work hard while doing the thing. So again, we have our sun, which is our greater luminary in the sky, the biggest star in our solar system. We have the moon, which represents our internal connections to the self, the deepest and darkest parts of ourself that we usually keep hidden from other people, especially under a new moon, which is the dark moon. And Hekate does play a role in these transits, which I will get to in a second. We'll have those two directly together in Taurus, and then with Mercury being the fastest moving planet outside of the luminaries themselves. So, yes, while there is this energy of like externally and internally, and maybe in our speech and communication, we'll want to slow it down. Just having these three as the only Taurus energies as we move through this transit right now, it's helping to bring some speed and some fire under our butts, along with everything else going on. But again, there's going to be this aspect of you that does want to cool it down a little bit and want to slow down and kind of smell the roses while we are moving through these transits. But another part of you is also going to recognize the necessity of releasing so you can move forward. And I think that's the element of what we're really going to be looking at with this conjunction of the sun and the moon and Mercury all in Taurus together. We're slowing down for a moment so we can recognize where we're still holding on to that extra weight, where we still have that baggage that we really don't need to hold on to anymore. Because imagine it like this. Say you're hiking up a mountain and you're carrying your backpack, right? And maybe you don't drink water for a very long time. And in your backpack, it's your first time backpacking. So you brought a lot of things you thought would be necessities that you didn't touch once. And you're going you're really fast, you're really fast, you're really fast. So much so that like you're just trying to get to the top that you don't realize how heavy your baggage actually is. Until you get to the top, you finally take a sip of water, and that sip ends up being a large gulp. And you drink so much water that it takes some of the weight off, which reminds you that what you're carrying is a lot. You actually have a heavy load, which you didn't realize when you were so focused to get to the top. You didn't realize how much you were actually carrying because you were steady driven focus going forward. But it's once you get to the top or that first like rest period, right? That you realize like, man, I am really weighed down. Like I really do have a lot that I haven't touched that I don't really need. You were so focused before, your attention was elsewhere that you didn't pay attention to what you were actually carrying. And now with this Taurus energy, even though it is towards the end of Taurus season, with this Taurus energy, it's a brief rest period. It's a reprieve from wherever you were going previously, but that reprieve isn't necessarily so you can take a breath and a break, which is also true. You also do get a break in that aspect, but the break is more so for recognition. It's not just taking a break because you're tired, it's taking a break because it is time to stop. You need a drink, you need something to eat, and it's in that break that you recognize, "Oh, I've been holding on to this thing. I don't need it. I do not need it." And that's kind of what this new moon represents. It's just kind of that check-in to say like, "What have you been carrying? What can you let go of? What do you no longer need?" Or maybe you thought you might have needed, but truly never needed in the first place. It's like those things that we thought we needed to keep ourselves safe, those coping mechanisms, those maybe leaning towards the bad habits that we adopted to try to keep us safe from our external environments. But then you actually get out into the environment and you're like, wait, not only do I, excuse me, hiccup, not only do I not need this habit or coping mechanism to keep me safe, but ultimately, it was just holding me back from experiencing the true joy that this environment offers. And because I was trying to keep myself safe, I didn't allow myself to experience the joy and the expansion that this environment offers until I just decided, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway, despite this habit or coping mechanism that I've adopted for a very long time. You're going to put yourself out there, and it's going to be through this rest that you recognize that. Maybe it's through the rest, maybe on the new moon you end up doing something, going somewhere, meeting somebody that will help you recognize and understand A, the necessity of the break to recognize what you need to let go of, and B, you never needed to hold on to it in the first place. And ultimately, these coping mechanisms and other things were just holding you back. And then it's going to kind of be like, I'm picturing like a domino effect where you realize, well, if this one thing I never actually needed and it was just holding me back in that aspect, if I get rid of this thing, well, now I'm seeing that this thing related to that thing, and maybe I don't need that thing anymore, and then that thing. And it's like when I pluck my eyebrows and you start to, like, you get the big ones out first, and then you start to see the tiny ones that are almost like blending in with the outside. And you're like, oh, but you wouldn't have seen it unless you got really deep and noticed the first one, which made you notice the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. Weird metaphors, I know, but I love speaking in metaphors. It's how we get the point across, it's how stories are told and lessons are delivered. So that's kind of the meat and potatoes of the main aspect of the sun and moon and Mercury that we're going to see with this new moon. But on top of the sun and the moon conjoining Mercury, we'll also have a sextile with Jupiter at 21 degrees and 21 minutes in Cancer. 21, 21. 21, can you do something for me? Except it's Jupiter this time. Jupiter can always do something for you if you're willing to work with Jupiter in that aspect. And another thing to note that with Jupiter, a lot of people focus on like, oh, it's all good luck when it comes to Jupiter, but I think that's a very narrow lens, a very narrow and only one sided of the coin view of what Jupiter offers. Because ultimately, Jupiter and luck as a whole, they're neutral. Luck isn't only ever good. You can also have really shitty luck. You can also be down on your luck. And same thing with Jupiter. Jupiter is simply something that expands the things that it touches. So I think we can all agree a lot of astrologers predicted that Jupiter moving through Cancer was going to be this like amazing and lucky and blah, 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 like this whole big, expansive, beautiful, good luck, everything's going to be great. Again, because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, which means it really likes being in Cancer energy. But Jupiter entered Cancer sometime, I believe, last spring, and I think we can all say that this last year has been anything but happy-go-lucky. But that's because Jupiter brings expansion. It doesn't just bring good luck, it brings expansion to what already exists. So that means, in terms of what's going on in society, It's going to expand what already exists, and what we've been seeing has already existed, has not been very pretty, which is why we're seeing such expansion of the bullshit, to put it lightly. I'm not going to get into politics right now. That'll be for a different video. But I think we can all agree that the expansion of the violence, the war in general, the disconnect, the separation between classes, etc. That's been expanded greatly. But in terms of Jupiter and how it interacts during these transits, it's going to expand your own mindset. So, especially when Jupiter is making a positive aspect, in this case, a sextile to our sun and our moon and our Mercury, if you approach this understanding of like taking the break in order to the productivity of the break is the recognition of what you can now let go of. If you approach this as a means of like release rather than like white knuckle gripping everything that you know you need to release, if you are holding on to it for dear life because you are scared to let go of it, because you're afraid of what that means for your personal identity and where you see yourself moving towards as we move ahead, if you're so afraid to let go of it, Jupiter's going to expand that fear. Jupiter is going to expand the idea of what could happen if you don't have it anymore. The lack aspect of it, the fear aspect of it. Jupiter expands anything it touches. So if you are approaching this reprieve and the opportunity to let go as something that is coded in loss. That means like, oh, but if I let go of this thing, who am I? It's going to expand that identity crisis. And maybe that'll be a good thing because sometimes I know in my past, certainly for me, I didn't learn anything in my past unless it was this huge, a big, big life shattering lesson. Very stubborn in that aspect. And honestly, the stubbornness is very Taurian energy as we will be moving through for this new moon. And Taurus is in my 12th house. Of course, sometimes the hardest lessons and the most important lessons I need to learn, I'm stubborn about, you know? But that's the same energy as Jupiter is bringing. If you are going to be stubbornly holding on to this identity and this baggage that you really do not need and you know you don't need it, but you're afraid of what it means for who you will become if you make the space within you, Jupiter will expand those fears. But again, it's possible you might need that expansion of the lack and the fears and the identity crisis in order to finally let go. But if you know you don't need that, release it. Don't let yourself be caught up in the tumult of what it could possibly mean to venture into the unknown. Start shifting your perspective of release from, oh my gosh, I'm losing this side of myself and I'm losing these people and I'm losing the situation and I'm losing so much and everything's going away and going astray. Shift your perspective from that into, oh wow, I'm making a lot of space here. And rather than the space being filled with fear and lack and tumult and scarcity, the space is room for new creation. And then you think back into the past times of your life. When else have I created space for myself? And what entered my life after that space was created? And how did that make my life better then? And start to expand on the possibility and the potentiality. Because again, Jupiter expands anything that your mind is going towards. So if you're focusing on the space that's created as a means of like a blank canvas that an artist can create anything on, look at it like that, and Jupiter will expand the opportunities that you can create something new on this canvas that's going to bring greater beauty, greater expression, greater love, greater light, greater abundance into your life. That's the aspect that Jupiter's making here. And it is a looser sextile with the sun and the moon. And then an even looser one with Mercury here. It's a little bit over 4-degree orb. But it's still important because Jupiter being the biggest planet in the solar system, I usually give a little bit more leeway to Jupiter in terms of the aspects that it's making. So just think about it like that. If you do feel, if you start to get those subtle hints that you know something, whether it's like your personal belongings, the space that you call your home or your own, maybe some friendships or relationships, maybe just personal items that you've had since childhood. If you know and you're getting those nudges that it's time to let go, and you feel yourself drifting into the lack, remember that Jupiter will expand anything that you're feeling during this new moon. So challenge yourself to shift your perspective and therefore adjust your feelings towards the release. Releasing makes space to align you to what is actually true to you right now in the new. Because the you that's in the new is not the you that was true then. That was then true. Just to keep with the rhyming. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. Let's move on from there. We'll also have two semi-sextiles, one with Venus in Gemini at 27 degrees and 21 minutes, and then another one on the other side with Eris in Aries. And that one's the tightest orb that the sun and the moon will be making here. That's a 0 degree and 21 minute orb. And I like how it's kind of balanced between the two because we have Venus in Gemini and then Eris in Aries, and then the sun and the moon together in Taurus. So it's almost these two sides of the coins, right? Because Venus is representative of, among other things, harmony and beauty and togetherness, and then Eris is the discord. Venus is the harmony of that aspect, and Eris is the chaos that can come with the lack of harmony. So it's like the sun and the moon kind of being in between these one planet and then one asteroid here, both representative of two sides of the divine feminine, right? Because Eris to me is a very great representation of the chaos that the void can bring, and how if we allow the chaos to reign, it does create more space. Venus is representative of that idea of the beauty that the void can bring, and how we can blossom into something new and artistic and creative and expressive, and something that aligns to our aesthetic idea of what we actually want to see grow and blossom in our lives. Having the sun and the moon directly between the two, it's like this merging of chaos and order coming together. And then, of course, the sun and the moon being the two luminaries, the sun, the brightest star in the sky, the moon being under its darkness of night. So it's like this very divine balance of the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, all coming together into one to help you realize that the chaos is not something to be feared. The chaos is not something that you need to run away from or hide from or avoid. The chaos can actually help you tap into the magic of the void. And I think that's very beautiful. And then, like I said, Hekate will be coming into play here. And we have Hekate making a square to the sun and the moon. It will be at 27 degrees and 34 minutes in Aquarius. So actually, it's going to be making a square to the sun, the moon, and Mercury because it's going to be sitting right in between that 28 and 25-degree mark. So Hecate being the goddess of witches, you make petitions to Hecate under the new moons, under the dark moon. She's one of the dark mothers in that aspect. And so Hecate is the goddess of the crossroads as well as being the mother of witches. And I love when she does make these aspects during the new moons, which she has for a lot of the new moons this year. She's been making, if not strongly prominent aspects, she's been subtly in the background of a lot that we've been moving through. Because so far in 2026, there's been a lot of crossroads energies. It's been a lot of jettisoning energy of letting go and facing our fears and facing our shadows and coming to terms with the true extent, the true infinite nature of who we are, of no longer shunting parts of ourselves away in order to only focus on the light. But it's been this like beautiful merge of both sides of ourselves within the light and the dark, the shadow and the sun. For lack of a better word for that. But we've been moving through a lot of that, of a lot of coming together of both aspects of ourselves. And Hecate making that tense aspect, squares can be tense aspects because again, our spirits in terms of astrology, this is very like spiritual, heady stuff. Our spirits want to flow freely in the atmosphere, but the squares force us to bring our energy and ground it into the earth, ground it to reality. And that's why it can be tense energy, because energy wants to be free where the square is forced that groundedness. But with it being Hecate under the new moon, bringing that grounded energy, she's helping you ground your decision at that crossroads. She's helping you tap into the magic of your own divinity and your own darkness and your own shadow, and helping you see the true magic and potentiality of your nature. And I think in terms of this crossroads energy, we've been talking about shifting the focus from releasing being something to be afraid of and like change being something to be afraid of to seeing it as pure potentiality. Hecate's the square with asteroid Hecate with the sun and the moon and Mercury is going to help you ground that energy, that shift. You're standing at the crossroads where you're saying, I could steer this way and tell myself that I will remain scared and still do it even if I'm scared, but knowing that if I let myself like fester in this scared energy, that it's just going to it's going to keep me like you're going to be trying to run forward, but it's like somebody's holding that big backpack you were carrying with the mountain. You're going to be trying to move forward so you can get to that first rest spot to recognize what you need to let go of, but somebody's holding your backpack like this. So it's like you're running and you're running and you're running and you're not sure why you're not moving. You're not sure why there's no progress, but it's because something's holding you back. And what's holding you back? It's that fear. It's the position of your awareness towards lack. That's what's holding you back. But you come to that crossroads and you say, what if I wasn't scared? And sometimes like fear can be a tool in that aspect where it can keep you it can help you survive in instances where your life is truly on the line. But other times fear truly is just like a barrier to entry. Will you be strong enough to face the fears of releasing what you know you needs to be released in order to make it to the next iteration of your existence? And for this new moon, the next iteration is simply that rest point where you get to finally see what you've been holding on to that it's time to let go of. But you won't be able to get to that rest point until you release the fear. And that's that crossroads energy. That's what's grounding. It's that realization that, yeah, maybe I have been scared. Maybe I've been a lot more scared than I've ever let myself admit to myself. What if I wasn't scared anymore? Or what if I was still scared, but I made myself so deluded in my brain that I'm no longer scared by just saying, no, I'm not scared. No, I don't mind letting things go. I'm a minimalist. You could be the most maximalist person in the world. Just keep telling yourself, I'm a minimalist. Of course it's easy for me to let go. Of course it's easy for me to just release stuff that I no longer need or maybe I've never needed. Sometimes like the brain seems like it is a prison sometimes, but ultimately the brain is also very easily tricked. So if the brain is so easily tricked into thinking that it's fearful, it can be just as easily tricked into thinking that it's confident and brave and strong and capable. That's that crossroads energy. That's what we're grounding into reality with Mother Hekate. God, I love her. God, I love her. And then we're going to continue on from there. Mercury, other than that connection with the sun and the moon, it's also going to be making a somewhat loose, a exactly 2 minutes and 30 or 2 degrees and 30 minute orb with Uranus, which is going to be at 1 degree and 11 minutes. 111. I love that. 111 and 23. 23 has been following me recently, so that's fascinating. But I would say that conjunction with Uranus is more so just an amplification of the unpredictability of what can happen if you do choose to just go after it anyway. To release what you know is holding you back and allowing that to slingshot, springboard usher you forward into the next iteration again of whatever is next for you that you cannot make it to unless you release what you know is time to let go of. Uranus is just adding that extra element of chaotic unpredictability to it, especially with it being in Gemini, especially being at the very, very early degrees of Gemini. And technically, it's an Aries degree because it's the first degree of Gemini. So I would say it's just that amplification of the fast paced energy and the energy of unpredictability. But I would say it's going to be unpredictability that works in your favor here. Because once you do finally let go of maybe something you've been holding on to for too long, you're going to expect it to be a slow moving process from there. But this conjunction with Mercury, again, the fastest moving planet in our solar system, not including the luminaries, Mercury being the fastest moving planet, Uranus in Gemini, Mercury moving into Gemini like a day and a half after this new moon. I think maybe a day. I'd have to check the dates, but very soon after this new moon station's exact. Mercury then moves into Gemini, where it will be at home for Gemini season. That is fast fucking paced energy. That is trickster energy. That is unpredictability in general because Gemini is unpredictable. So you have Uranus, the planet that represents chaotic unpredictability. You've got Mercury, which is Hermes, which is Loki, which is a trickster energy, also very fast paced, fast moving. In Gemini, where it's in its domicile, where it really likes to be, and it moves even more quickly and efficiently and unpredictably. And not only is Mercury going to move into Gemini, it'll then directly conjoin Uranus at the very start of Gemini season. So it's like part of you is going to expect it to be a slow moving process once you decide to release what you know you need to release. It's not going to be slow, babe. It's not going to be slow. And that's going to be part of the unpredictability of it because it almost feel like this is just me personally speaking. I have been in a very vast liminal space where spirits basically told me to just sit and enjoy paradise and enjoy the space that I have right now while I still can, because it's going to change at the drop of a hat. But I've been in this space for over a year now where I've been getting the same message, like, just sit tight. Just sit tight. You don't need to be anywhere else but right here. Just sit tight. 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 And even when I thought I was going to leave in September, and then again in November, and then again in January, it's just part of it has been me holding myself back. Part of it's been spirit. Take a good look at what needs to be released in these final days, because again, you're going to be surprised at how quickly things begin to move for you. Unpredictably, miraculously. But be mindful of the trickster energy, especially when Uranus conjoins Mercury. And I'll talk more about that in my Gemini season reading, which should be posted a couple days after this one. So stay tuned for that. But let's move on. We already talked a little bit about Venus's semi-sextile with the Sun and Moon and Mercury. It's also making two very close aspects with both Mars and Chiron, which are directly conjoin one another, which we'll get to in a second, in Aries. So Venus is going to be at 27 degrees and 21 minutes in Gemini. Chiron is at Mars is at 28 degrees and 24 minutes. Chiron is at 28 degrees and 25 minutes Aries. So that's making a 1 degree and 3 minute orb. And then sticking with that 1 and 3 rendition, Venus will also trine asteroid Hekate, which we just talked about, with 27 degrees and 34 minutes in Aquarius. And again, that's a 0 degree and 13-minute orb. We'll talk more about the sextile with Mars in just a second, just because I want to touch on this trine with Hekate very quickly. So while Hekate is squaring the sun and the moon, again, it's bringing that grounded energy there. With that trine to Venus, it's also helping you tap into, again, both sides of that goddess energy that we talked about with Venus and Eris, because Hekate is the dark mother, or one of the dark mothers. She is part of the dark divine feminine aspect, where Venus has been doubted more as the lighter divine feminine aspect, the more acceptable divine feminine aspect, even though people love to forget Venus is also the goddess of war. But semantics, hearsay, whatever. I think this trine, which again, trines are a harmonious aspect. A trine with a 13-minute orb, and 13 being a vastly esoteric spiritual number, it's just amplifying that connection to your divine feminine aspect, to unity with all sides of yourself, and then bringing in the sides of yourself of the dark feminine and the quote light feminine together, so that you can ground that energy back into reality. So you can have this harmonious energy as you choose to release. And I think this aspect is what's going to be another energy that helps you kind of shift your perspective from seeing the space created as lack versus seeing it as a blank canvas. And then once you see it as the blank canvas, all of a sudden the rainbow of paints show up that you can just start picking up and throwing on that canvas however you damn well please. That's going to be the energy that the trine with Hekate makes here. But then let's move down to the Mars conjunction really quickly. Well, not really quickly. I kind of want to dive into this one because we're going to have Mars directly, precisely, down to the solar arc minute conjoining Chiron. And this is the third direct aspect down within 1 single minute, not 1 degree, 1 single minute of the other planets that Chiron has made during a new or full moon transit in the last 3 months. The third time. And the fact that it keeps happening under new and full moons is significant here, because new moons are the start of a new cycle. Full moons are like processing and the releasing of what no longer needs to be held on to. And so with this new moon, we're starting this new moon cycle, which again, the first new moon where all of the outer planets are sextile and trine one another in the early degrees of their sign. Brand new energy, brand new cycle that we have not dealt with as of yet. All the while, Mars is making an exact down to the minute. It is like the precision with these transits are seldom seen. And that's why I like to emphasize it so much. It is not normal to have this kind of precision. One moon after another moon after another moon, especially all of them involving Chiron in some capacity. It's not normal. It's not necessarily weird. It's just very rare, especially with them happening on the day down to the minute of the new and the full moons. So the first time we saw it was Chiron and Eris coming together. Again, Eris being the goddess of discord and chaos, and Chiron representing our deepest wounds and our greatest efforts to heal them. But ultimately, Chiron was known as the wounded healer because he had infinite capacity to heal everybody else except his own ailments. So when Chiron and Eris came together, that was the first look at the ways that at our big ivory tower that we built up. I've spoke about this in other videos, so I won't go too deeply into this, but the big ivory tower we built up, when Chiron conjoined Eris down to the minute, that ivory tower collapsed. All of the walls we built to keep ourselves protected and in keeping our wounds safe and guarded from the world around us, Eris shook the foundation so it could come crumbling down. And then we were left bare and exposed and vulnerable to everything around us. And in these other moon cycles, we've been learning how to face that vulnerability and not see it as something, again, something to be afraid of, but the opportunity to be more expansive in our expression and find the ways that we can properly and not necessarily more safely, but more openly and more securedly, being secure in ourselves, move through the openness without feeling like we need to hide behind our towers. First, it was Chiron and Eris, and then it was Mercury and Chiron. I don't remember which moon cycle that was, but Mercury then directly conjoined Chiron down to the minute. It allowed us to speak a new sense of connection and understanding to the wounds that we do have. Because the walls came crumbling down and we now feel exposed and vulnerable, but that doesn't mean our wounds just disappeared. If anything, it may have amplified the wounds and made them more noticeable. But Mercury conjoining Chiron gave us the opportunity to breathe a new sense of life and a new sense of understanding into the ways that we not only look at our wounds and process our wounds within us, but the ways we express our wounds openly. Because a lot of times it's through the expression that we find a deeper sense of healing of those wounds. But we needed the tower to come down first so we would feel open and vulnerable in order to take those baby steps towards expressing ourselves, in order to find that clarity and that understanding and that peace within ourselves. So even though the wounds still exist, we now feel more comfortable being open and expressive about how those wounds are manifesting in our lives. Now we have Mars, the planet of action, planet of integrity, the planet of truth, also the planet of war. So we were open and exposed and vulnerable, but it was through our self expression that we found at least a semblance of navigation, right? Because Mercury is also the psychopomp, he's the messenger, he's a navigator of sorts. We found a sense of navigation of how to at least begin to venture out of the rubble of the crumblings of the ivory tower. And now we've stepped out of that threshold. We're beyond the rubble. We're still out in the open. We haven't rebuilt it yet, though, because now we're exploring. Mars helps us take that sense of exploration, that sense of expression that we now have, that we now feel comfortable with in terms of our wounding, and put action towards it. He being Mars helps us find the bravery that we need to actually step out into the world and be seen expressing our wounds, be seen in the openness and the vulnerableness. It puts action behind that orientation, that navigation of trying to now find our footing in this big open space now that we don't have our ivory tower to keep us safe anymore. And while we may still feel scared, we may still feel exposed, we may still feel vulnerable, we're still taking action. We're feeling the fear and we're doing it anyway. That's Mars conjoining Chiron. It's maybe putting fire behind those fears. So the fears are amplified, but it's almost like this energy of like, say you may have in the past, say you may have avoided certain experiences because you knew they weren't going to be comfortable. And you got so uncomfortable in your own comfortability for far too long that now you're purposely venturing out to places where it is uncomfortable because you now know that the discomfort doesn't mean you have to hide, but the discomfort means growth, and you know that because you took the time to allow those walls to crumble and to learn about how you can best express those wounds more openly so you can feel that sense of that semblance of belonging, which maybe you never felt before, which is why you felt like you had to build those ivory towers as a way to cope with the amplification of those wounds. But now you don't have that anymore, and you're recognizing you don't need it anymore, and you're finding more safety and more, again, belonging and more growth in the discomfort. And you're allowing Mars to guide you through that, to guide you towards action, to guide you towards more discomfort because you know the discomfort means a greater expansion of what it means to actually experience the world, which you probably haven't for a very long time. And again, we've got that sextile with Pluto, which is making just over a 1 degree orb, 1 degree in 3 minutes. Or not, did I say Pluto? We're getting to Pluto. I meant Venus. It's making that sextile with Venus, which is just helping you find the beauty through the expansion, find the beauty through the experience, find the beauty through the discomfort. And it's allowing, and then it's also, which I'll get to in a second because I want to point out that orb, but it's through the beauty that you are finding the purpose. It's through the beauty that you're finding the integrity. And it's a beauty that you're not used to labeling as beautiful because again, you got so used to comfort. You used to only see comfort as beauty, but now you're discovering the beauty through the discomfort. And that's kind of what Venus is representing here. Now, it's also making a looser square with Jupiter, again, that planet of expansion, and a looser square with the retrograded Pluto, which Pluto actually just stationed retrograde earlier today as I record this, just a couple hours ago. But what's fascinating here, it's making exactly a 7 degree and 4 minute orb to both Jupiter and Pluto, where it's sitting right now, which I don't usually go, especially on these videos. I don't talk about orbs greater than 5 degrees. They're still there. The energy is still felt, but a little bit looser. But for some reason, I looked up these orbs exactly, both of them, an aspect that's making a 7 degree and 4 minute orb from both Jupiter, the expansion, and Pluto, the destruction, the transformation, and the rebirth. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive deeply into that, but I thought that was incredibly fascinating. A subtle but prominent energy of the expansion of the death and the release of what we no longer need to hold on to so we can usher ourselves into transformation and rebirth of what is to become. So, moving on from there, we are going to jump back to Jupiter very quickly because I forgot to mention it's also making an exact, this is one of the most exact aspects other than the other Mars and Chiron, and then one more that I'll mention later, an exact biquintile aspect with asteroid Hekate. So, the expansion of that dark divine feminine. And again, I've talked about quintiles briefly on here before. Quintiles and biquintiles point to things that are innate gifts within us, but it's kind of the thing. I think I use the example of they're gifts that you need to become aware of in order to actualize them. So for example, say you're a prolific painter, you're never going to know that until you pick up a paintbrush. So the expansion of the energy of Hekate, which is the dark divine mother, and the darker shadow aspects of the feminine, and the mother of witches, the goddess of witches, magic, power, amplification of your magical power, the innate gifts that you have within you, and the amplification of those gifts of magical power and capability. And again, we petition Hecate under the new moon. If you feel called, go to any crossroads. Any crossroads. Sometimes when I never felt like actually going out, I would just go to the crossroads where my side yard and front yard and backyard all meet with one another. It can be that simple. You don't even have to leave your property. Go to a crossroads, give an offering to Hecate, and ask her to help you in this crossroads as you cross over the threshold of your fear. This is going to be a great night to do that. Whether you do it the night before, on the night of the 15th into the 16th, or you do it after, because again, the new moon station's exact at 4 p.m. Eastern time on the 16th. So you could do it just before the new moon or just after. Whichever you choose, it's up to you. It would be a great night to do so if you feel called. Don't do it if you're not feeling the call, but I felt the call to say that. And we did already touch on Uranus, but Uranus is making a near exact sextile with Vesta with a 0 degree and 10 minute orb. Vesta will be at 1 degree and 21 minutes in Aries. And as I've mentioned so many times before, because I adore Vesta's energy, I adore Vesta as a deity. Vesta is our sacred flame. Vesta exists in every single fire that's ever been burned forever. Vesta is the energy of the flame and the devotion to that flame, because once that flame is ignited, you need to stay devoted to it in order to keep the flame going. With that near exact sextile with Uranus, along with all of the other energy that Hecate is making that night, part of that offering could be fire. Part of that offering could be a promise to yourself to stay devoted to whatever gifts choose to reveal themselves to you as you jettison the baggage and as you make the space to discover these gifts. part of your offering can be to say, I will remain devoted to myself, to my path, to my truth, and to these gifts, because I know if I stay devoted to these gifts and if I foster these gifts, I will align more readily to my own truth and therefore be able to show up on this earth in deliverance of my purpose. And with Uranus making that aspect, unpredictability. Expect the unexpected in the unveiling of not only the gifts, which, yes, expect the unexpected in the way these gifts come about. Don't be afraid to experiment in order to discover those gifts, but also in the ways that you feel the need to be devotional, especially if you're a long-term practitioner. I consider myself in under the umbrella of the chaos magic practitioners, because I just do things when I feel the call to do them, and I do them however the fuck I feel like doing them that day. But in terms of more traditional practitioners, we can get very connected to the ritual aspect of it, where it needs to be precisely this, precisely that on precisely this day. But with Uranus making that harmonious sextile to Vesta, this would be a very good time to allow yourself to stray away from the stringence. Is that a word, stringent? I think it is a word. Is that the word I want, though? That's the question. The strictness, we'll say, just so I'm making sure I'm saying it right. The strictness of your approach to the craft, to your truth. Allow yourself to tap more into that chaos side, because Uranus is going to feed you in very, very beneficial ways if you lean into that more chaotic, unpredictable energy. And dare yourself, challenge yourself to go against what you normally would consider to be by your own standard or by the books. And then going along with the Vesta or the Vesta train, excuse me, we'll also have Neptune at 3 degrees and 43 minutes in Aries, conjoining Vesta at 1 degrees and 21 minutes. And that's making a 2 degree and 22 minute orb. So again, 343 for Neptune, 121 for Vesta, 222 orb. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I pay a lot of attention to the numbers. And then Uranus being at 111, there's a lot of sacred energy here, a lot of sacred numerology energy here. This is a brand new beginning, and I feel like I've been saying that for so many. But again, with this being the first new moon, where all of the outer planets are officially in their new signs and all of them making aspects to one another, regardless how loose they are, this is new beginning. This is sacred consecration energy. This is sacred consecration energy. And Neptune being the planet of our dreams, our illusions, our visions, our spirituality, conjoining Vesta, which again is that sacred devotional flame. And then Vesta is just going to keep inching closer and closer to Neptune and will make a conjunction during Gemini season. Again, I'll talk more about that in my Gemini season reading, my transit reading. Pay attention for that. But it's just adding that extra layer, not only of the unpredictability that Uranus offers, but expanding on our dreams and being devoted to our spiritual side. With Neptune and Uranus making these tight conjunctions and aspects with Vesta, with Hekate being lit up from many different angles, as we have already talked about, there is an amplification of dark divine feminine magic reawakening, reigniting, the flame being tended to once more. Pay attention to what comes up, not only during this new moon, but for the entire Taurus moon cycle. So from the Taurus new moon all the way up until the Gemini new moon, especially during that Sagittarius full moon. I've been getting nudges about the Sagittarius full moon on the 31st of May. I've been getting subtle nudges about that day for months now. For months now. Just pay attention. Pay attention. We're getting closer to the end here, but the only aspect that I noted that is making anything to the North Node is, of course, Pluto. They are making a near exact semi-sextile to one another. So Pluto will be at 5 degrees and 29 minutes in Aquarius, again retrograded as of today. And then the North Node is going to be at 5 degrees and 20 minutes Pisces, so a 9-minute orb from one another. And I think what this is just amplifying is that idea of, like, because the North Node represents our forward movement, our trajectory of where we see ourselves going in the distant future, purpose-driven future, though. It's not just what we want, so we decide we're going to do this thing today because we think we want that. It's like, no, I feel in my soul this is where I'm going. Pluto is just helping us to burn down anything that doesn't align to our destined path so that we can make the space for what will become of us as we align to our path, and also the path itself as we continue to align to that trajectory. And then just to add, Lilith, for the first time, pretty much since she entered Sagittarius months and months and months ago, is now making any aspects to anything this new moon, which I think it's funny that Vesta and Hecate are kind of picking up like the added baggage, for lack of a better term, but the added responsibility of what the dark moon would usually be doing in this new moon cycle. Because again, she's been working hard. She's been working really hard. She deserves this break. So I'm glad her sisters are picking up the tab for her for this time around. And then finally, I said we did have two exact aspects. We already talked about Mars and Chiron together within one solar arc minute. We also have another aspect within one solar arc minute. It is a trine between two asteroids. We have the asteroid Persephone at 23 degrees and 35 minutes in Aries, trining the asteroid Eros at 23 degrees and 36 minutes in Leo. Two fire signs. Two asteroids that represent like an aspect of innocence and the loss of innocence, but also the gaining of something greater after that innocence had been lost. Persephone, we all know the story of Persephone, got dragged into the underworld, got tricked into staying there for half the year, lost her innocence, gained a kingdom, gained the wisdom, gained power as payment for that loss of innocence. Eros, his loss of innocence is Eros is akin to Cupid. He's the son of Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and harmony and also war. We can never forget that aspect, even though people love to try to forget. Eros being Aphrodite's son, I say that he represents innocence because when we think of the love of Eros and of Cupid and of shooting of the arrows, we make it equal to puppy love. But with Eros's love, it might seem like on the surface that's something that's just going to pass, and it's sensual and it's excitable and it's fun and it's freeing. But there is a sense of like devotional longing when it comes to the love that Eros offers. And because of that, because it's so strong and so magnetic and just like pulls you in and almost like takes your brain away. Where if you've experienced this before, you know, where it's just like you cannot eat, sleep, think, breathe, even sleep and dream without this other person being somewhere in your energetic or mental field. It literally takes some of your autonomy away, which is why I equate that to a sense of loss of innocence. Because before you knew this person, you were just living your life and enjoying yourself and having a good time and experiencing that sensual nature. But once Eros enters the picture, all of a sudden you are no longer innocent to just enjoy that life. And even if you do eventually get over the sense of longing love that you feel for somebody, you never forget them. And you never forget the lessons of love that you learned from both their presence and their absence. So you can never go back to who you were before the love of Eros enters your life. And that's where that loss of innocence comes in there. And this is going to be another time I read directly off my notes because I don't want to have to keep pausing and going through it and trying to get the message across. So, what I wrote here is I said the goddess which rules over springtime, grain, vegetation, and has dominion over the underworld and the dead, truly the best of both worlds scenario for her, makes an exact down to the minute harmonious aspect to Eros, the god which rules over our erotic love and sensory exploration of our desires. These two coming together gives me the energy of what it feels like to lose your virginity when you're younger. An act that society deems as losing your innocence, but ultimately, my screensaver went on. But ultimately it's just a rite of passage into a more mature and expressive and embodied version of who you are. It's possible this moon will represent the starting point or a particular turning point in the way you express yourself openly, especially in the realm of your sexuality and sensory exploration of the world around you. And I've been talking a lot about sexuality recently and the ways in which, especially women, are reclaiming our sense of sensuality and sexuality openly while also decentering men. So it's almost this reclamation of the divine feminine aspect of recognizing that our sexuality was never truly for them. We've been taught that it is supposed to be for men, and us being more open and having our ass cheeks out and dressing provocatively. Society has tried to force feed us the belief that we wear makeup and we do ourselves up and that we make ourselves look good and feel good and we express ourselves and our bodies and our sexuality openly for the benefit of men. When in actuality, it's because it's an innate part of what it means to embody the divine feminine aspect, to embody the void. Because if you are a woman or a woman at birth, you know what it is to have a uterus and to be directly connected to the void. Whether you've ever been pregnant or have a kid or not, just having the access to the void within your body is a sacred right. It's a sacred right. And the void, the uterus, The sexual organs down there directly connects us to our divine feminine aspect. And if you look at like cultural traditions, especially in Africa, where they were deeply, deeply connected to source, to the mother, to the divine mother, to Mother Earth, they were always very openly like sexual and expressive with their body and their movements. And it was never once for a man. Never once for a man. It was to connect more deeply to the divine. It was to connect more deeply to our nature, our true, full, embodied nature, which embodies the void, which embodies sensuality, which embodies the way that we invigorate our senses and the ways we express our sexuality openly. Before the patriarchy took over, woman's sexuality was one of the most sacred acts of expression that this world has ever known. And men, you know what? I'm not even going to get into that. We won't even get into that discussion right now. The important thing to note is this trine in fire signs, mind you, the youngest fire sign and arguably the most expressive fire sign being Leo, because Leo loves to express openly. Leo is ruled by the sun. Of course, it's the most visibly expressive of the fire signs. I won't go more deeply into that. Argue with the wall. Anyway, these two coming together in a near exact trine, down to a minute. Again, this kind of precision is seldom seen during these major transits. Down to the last minute, this is a reclamation of the divine feminine energy, of that loss of innocence, but that gaining of power, your seat of power. And then we think about all of the aspects that Hekate and Vesta are making too. There is an aspect here of the amplification of our divine feminine rights. And when I speak on this, if you're a man watching this video, it doesn't mean you're excluded from this because we all have both sides of that, the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine. We all have that within us, whether you are a masculine presenting person, feminine presenting person, non binary person, trans, any which direction you are, you have all of these aspects within you. But we've been programmed and propagandized from the start to only see ourselves or express ourselves on one side or the other. And if you are part of the LGBTQ community, and you have gone beyond that gendered or binary expression, you are already, I don't want to say more spiritually evolved, but in terms of your open expression of your true identity, you are greatly, I won't say more because it's not about the competitive aspect of it, but you are greatly tapped into the divine nature of your truest expression. And you probably know that. You do probably know that. But again, for the men that seem to get, especially recently, you feel like you're attacked, you're not being attacked. You're being invited to tap into the expression of your true fullness. And not only that, to allow yourself, to rid yourself of the judgment, to jettison the judgment out of your mind, your body, your psyche, your consciousness of what it means for women who are stepping into their full embodied divine feminine power to be that. It's not an invitation for you. It has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. And the sooner you can become a patron of that fact and raise up the goddesshood the ways that it needs to be raised right now in order to restore that balance between the patriarchy and the matriarchy, the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang. The more you can be a patron of that understanding and truly anchor into the awareness that it means you have nothing to do with this, while also having everything to do with it. Thus is the nature. You know what? I think we all know what we need to do. And I'm not going to get too already into it because we are already out of time. But again, this new moon is the first new moon and the first moon cycle where all of the outer planets are officially in their new signs. Lilith is taking a break. She's not making a single aspect to anything else going on in this chart. But while Lilith is taking that break, we have the dark moon, or the dark moon goddess. I'm confusing myself now. Hekate, the goddess of witches, the triple moon goddess, there she is. I couldn't find that. The triple moon goddess of Hekate, who we make petitions to under the dark moon, the new moon. She is going to be playing a prominent role in the amplification and the grounding and the expressiveness and the revelation of our divine magical gifts and innate powers within us. Vesta, making all of those aspects, will show us the ways that we can remain devotional to the amplification and expression of these gifts. Eris and Venus are working together with the Sun and the Moon and the Mercury to find that balance between the chaotic feminine and the harmonious feminine and recognize that they don't need to be at odds. They can work together in order to allow the light and the dark to come together with the sun and the moon. There's a lot going on here, which is amplifying the balance that we need in order to become fully embodied in our truest expression. And this new moon is truly only the beginning. It's truly only the beginning. Strap in, folks, because we still got a year ahead of us. So pay attention to the Gemini season reading. That'll be posted probably a couple days after this one. And let's go, babe. Inward and onward and upward. We're trekking, we're going, and we're flowing. Hell yeah. Anyway, thanks for being here as always. I love y'all, and I hope you got something good out of this. Love doing this. I'll see you next time. Bye.